For the prosecution, Matthew Colangelo spoke about a 2015 meeting in Trump Tower between Donald Trump, his former fixer Michael Cohen, and a man named David Pecker. He's the longtime publisher of the National Enquirer. It's where a scheme to bury negative stories about Donald Trump's relationships with women was allegedly hatched. It's a scheme commonly referred to as catch and kill. Colangelo then recounted to the jurors how, in the wake of the release of the Access Hollywood tape, which was a political earthquake, Michael Cohen paid former adult film actress Stormy Daniels $130,000 to keep her alleged affair with Donald Trump silent. According to reporting from the courtroom, Colangelo said this, quote, "So at Trump's direction, Michael Cohen negotiated a deal to buy Ms. Daniels' story in order to prevent American voters from learning that information before Election Day." Trump would later go on to reimburse Michael Cohen and try to cover up what the payment through Michael Cohen was for, leading to the ex-president's indictment last year on 34 counts of falsifying business records. Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty and has denied a relationship with Stormy Daniels. Today, the prosecution argued that Trump's willingness to go through that trouble, quote, shows just how important it was for him to hide the true nature of Michael Cohen's illegal payment to Stormy Daniels and the overall election conspiracy that they had launched. Now, over to the other side. For the defense team's part, Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, argued that Trump was not involved in covering up these payments and that a catch-and-kill strategy isn't illegal anyway. He went on to say this, quote, "I have a spoiler alert. There's nothing wrong with trying to influence an election. It's called democracy." Interesting word choice. In the last few minutes of court today, the first witness took the stand. It was Mr. Pecker, Trump ally and former National Enquirer publisher. Pecker spoke of a practice he called, quote, checkbook journalism. He said it's where the media outlet would pay for stories. Pecker is expected to be back on the stand to continue his testimony when court resumes tomorrow. All of today's developments setting up a remarkable and historic clash ahead for the country. New York Times writes this about it, quote, "America has grown accustomed to seeing Trump smash through its customs and now witnessing a phenomenon that is the first in its 248 years of our history. Presidents have been impeached. They've been driven from office, rejected at the polls. Trump is about to be the first to have his fate decided not just by voters, but by 12 citizens in a jury box." An ex-president on trial for potential criminality is where we begin the hour with some of our most favorite reporters and friends, all of them back from the courthouse and here at the table. NBC News correspondent, my friend and colleague Von Hilliard is here, plus two folks who were inside for us today, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin and New York Times investigative reporter who's talked us through this story since before it was a criminal case, Suzanne Craig. Also joining us, former U.S. Attorney and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman's here to keep us honest. Von Hilliard, you first. There is such a lack of words to describe new wow moments for Trump. But when I started seeing the notes from inside the courtroom about the opening statements, I stopped. I was on the street and I stopped. I gasped and I stood there and read all of them. It's still hard to believe that this is something that's been swirling around in our politics. You cover that better than anyone. It's now something, though, as the Times points out, being put in front of jurors.
In facts that are still coming to light. We've been talking about this for years now, and yet us as journalists and the public at large are still learning basic facts about what went down. You know, David Pecker walking inside of that courthouse today as Donald Trump gazed over. We don't know if they've seen each other since 2017 when there was an alleged meeting at the White House. Donald Trump had become president, and the district attorney's office is already outlining that they have evidence that he went over to the White House for a thank you dinner, right, to thank him for his efforts in 2015 and 2016. This is, you know, let's say Donald Trump is...
He says efforts, the other says illegal catch and kill, tomato, right?
Right. And even if I may, let's say Donald Trump is not found guilty of falsifying business records. This is going to be a story of how far a political candidate for the highest office in America can go to win the presidency, right? He got to the point here where it took legal action 8 years later to get to the point for some basic details about an effort that Donald Trump allegedly engaged in to keep damaging stories from the American public and the American electorate. 42,000 votes was the difference in 2016 in 3 major states. That story could have very well impacted the future of of America. And
this is an extraordinarily important point, because in as much as I feel like I've lived 11 lives since 2016, we are right back there with a very divided country. They now have probably a much more distinct and different acceptance of the facts than they did even in 16. The election expected to be close. We don't know if that'll bear out. But this idea that we're learning new information, say more. What did you learn today that you didn't know before?
The fact that there was the phone calls on October 26th, allegedly between Michael Cohen and Donald Trump. And then right after that, Michael Cohen goes over to the bank, sets up the account. The very next day, he goes and transfers that $130,000. Donald Trump, up through 2018, was denying that he knew about the $130,000 payment. So if the prosecution is actually able to corroborate that Donald Trump was aware, well, then Donald Trump, while a sitting president of the United States, was lying to the American public about what he knew. And this is the part where the FEC, you can file violations, you can file lawsuits all you want, but guess what? Just take 2024. We're 197 days from another presidential election. And if somebody sees what Donald Trump was allegedly able to get away with, right, why not challenge the system again? And that is what is going to be coming out through the evidence and the testimony of others, including those closest to Donald Trump.
I mean, Vaughn just laid out sort of the prism through which we have all sought to cover all of these issues, that the jury will decide if there's criminality beyond a reasonable doubt. But the country is going to have to wrestle with these facts, and they are sordid. They are in some ways technical, right? It's conduct in service of another crime. In other ways, they're so smutty they're painfully obvious. Michael Cohen didn't have sex with Stormy Daniels. The 2 pretty women at the center of this, Stormy Daniels or Karen McDougal. Michael Cohen didn't run for president and benefit from those stories staying secret. Michael Cohen went to jail. It feels like that is maybe a basic, topic sentence under which a lot of these witnesses will be supporting that story and that plot with their testimony.
Right. I think the idea is to almost not quite extract Michael Cohen, but to build the evidence around him.
Right.
He's going to probably come at the end in terms of a witness. But I was just, even today, I mean, I'm still struck by the new information that came out, and we're going to have narrators throughout. We heard about text messages that went back and forth with the National Enquirer when they went out to see Karen McDougal, one of the women who had a relationship with Donald Trump. And they were trying to confirm whether the story was true. We're going to hear what those text messages were. There was an election night. There was a message that went back and forth between one of the lawyers involved with that was representing Karen McDougal and Stormy McDonald's, and somebody at the National Enquirer saying, "What have we done?" We're going to see a lot more information like that come through. And I was also David Pecker was not on the stand for very long, but just hearing the details that we got, the idea that, they would, if a story, reporters were they were given about $10,000 to get that story. And I wasn't clear if that included payment to somebody or expenses in payment, but anything above that, he would have to sign off on it. And what that told me was the payments that went to Karen McDougal, that went to Stormy Daniels, were unusual. They were high, even the one that was related to the doorman, which I think was $30,000. These were extraordinarily high payments. We're going to hear more details from David Pecker about just how unusual these payments were. So that sort of information is now coming out. And I think every day we're going to hear the devil will be in the details on all of this.
Tell me, David Pecker was the first witness, but there was some other business, and we'll get to that in a minute. But can you just describe that scene to us of David Pecker? I mean, he's sort of launched a million memes, but the man himself, the Trump ally, so valued that Trump held a dinner to thank him. Catch and kill, not in dispute. He had a different name for it. Checkbook journalism. But just, can you take me through the moment where he walks in, takes the stand, and starts talking?
Yeah, he comes in and he walks up to the stand and he has a huge grin on his face. He just seemed very approachable. He seemed calm, and he sat down, obviously gave his name, and some of the first questions were because they wanted to establish his phone number, what his cell phone number was at the time. But he seemed very at ease and approachable. He was very likable, and I suspect he's going to play well with the jury. That was my real takeaway. And I know Lisa had some other observations, too, that I think were interesting that we've talked about.
My big takeaway from David, and I agree with Suzanne that he was very friendly and jovial. I was joking around with her during a break that he had like sort of big grandpa energy. You could picture him sunning
I'm just
himself.
thinking of a million covers of the National Enquirer and wondering like what mom wants big grandpa showing their kid the cover of the National Enquirer. But
Right,
yes, I
right.
get what you're
he was
saying.
a gentler person than I think we
Affable,
were expecting him to be. What he wasn't was rehearsed. And Joshua Steinglass, who was trying his darndest to get clear answers from David Pecker to some of the foundational questions, like how does checkbook journalism work? How do you develop a source? He was sort of talking about the underbelly of tabloid journalism, right? If you're in their world, the source universe that matters is a very different universe than our universes.
Sometimes.
It's hotel workers, people who work at dry cleaners, people who work at limousine companies, just all of hearing those details.
And you imagine them handing out, the reporters have $100 bills in their pocket. He didn't say this, but it was the idea that you're giving them money to get these stories means you're probably handing $100 or $200 or $500 to a doorman. He had that level of detail. And then he said, and it was interesting that the metric that matters, it's a weekly, was the sales. And the only thing that mattered was the cover. And this is going to come out too, because we're going to start hearing about the stories they caught and killed, the stories that Donald Trump planted, and the favorable ones about Donald Trump that he pushed forward. But there was, he's had covers about Ben Carson has been brought up, about the fact he was, he had guilty of
Ted Cruz.
Yeah, and Ted Cruz. And we're going to probably hear details about, potentially about not only how much those issues sold, but how much money went into getting those covers together.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.